Sneakers have undergone revolution after revolution during their long history, both in terms of design as well as manufacturing. From the invention of vulcanized rubber to the recent introduction of app-based controls, our favorite footwear has become transformed by game-changing upgrades. So how about we take a look at some of the most prominent innovations of all? First up, the history of sneakers technically began all the way back in 1839. Now, some of you might be confused, and we totally understand why. After all, the first sneakers were technically invented in 1876 when the new Liverpool Rubber Company introduced a pair of shoes with rubber soles for the very first time. But the thing is, those rubber soles were a massive innovation, and you can trace their origins to 1839 when Charles Goodyear invented vulcanized rubber. In a nutshell, vulcanization is the process of adding chemicals to rubber in order to make it more durable. Rubber tires used to melt on the hot roads back in those days, so Charles Goodyear decided to take things up a notch. He tried all sorts of chemicals, but one day he accidentally dropped the rubber into a frying pan after mixing in some sulfur, and much to his surprise, the scalding hot pan didn't damage it one bit. The invention allowed for better tires to be made, but it also made rubber suitable for sneakers. After all, you can't expect to wear your Yeezys or Dunk Lows if they start melting on the pavement, now can you? By the late 19th century, vulcanized rubber gave rise to those rubber-soled shoes we talk about, but some might say that true sneakers debuted much later. I think we can all agree that the Converse Chuck Taylor All-Stars represented the real starting point for this footwear craze. When they were released in 1917, they officially became the first mass-produced sneaker in history. And they had such enduring appeal, they were seen on the feet of skateboarders nearly a century after they came out. That's all thanks to the mix of simple form and seamless function. So it's safe to say that their design was downright innovative. Two things stand out here. The first of which is that vulcanized rubber sole. Durable enough to last a lifetime, and with a surprising amount of grip, they provided more than enough to make buyers keep coming back time and time again. However, there's another aspect to the All-Stars that resonated throughout the ages, namely that canvas upper. This made the shoes comfortable enough that you'd forget you even had them on, and the formula was so perfect that Converse hasn't strayed too far from it ever since. Sneakers mostly stayed the same for a few decades after this, but in 1974, something amazing happened. That's when Bill Bowerman came up with the iconic Nike Waffle trainer, forever changing the course of sneaker history. This is the man that trained Phil Knight, his fellow Nike founder, and he had a reputation for bringing the best out of his athletes. As soon as he got on the team with Nike, which was called Blue Ribbon Sports back then, he immediately got to work to try to come up with a unique new design. The goal was to provide athletes with some grip and traction, allowing them to make sharper turns while running and keeping themselves steady at faster speeds. Much like Charles Goodyear before him, Bowerman's stroke of inspiration came purely by accident, and it too involved cookware. Basically, the Nike co-founder noticed the grid-like pattern of his wife's waffles and realized that it would work perfectly for sneaker soles. His wife wasn't too happy about his experiments, with Bowerman ruining multiple waffle irons before perfecting the design, but as soon as it was done, he handed it to the runner for testing. This runner took off at an impossibly fast sprint, proving that Bowerman had struck gold. This wouldn't be the last time that Nike would upend the sneaker world with its forward-thinking ways. We all know how iconic the Air Jordan 1 was, but the Air Jordan 2 had something even more unique. This was the first shoe that contained a cushioning unit from end to end. We're talking about the Air sole, of course, and it's easy to take for granted these days. But when it was first introduced, it represented a major step forward for sneakerdom because athletes could jump higher and run harder without risking any permanent damage to their joints. It was a novel concept that pays tribute to Bill Bowerman's philosophy of reducing injuries as much as possible. Even non-athletes got a far superior experience thanks to the Air sole, but we'd be remiss if we forgot about some of the other players in this game. Nike wasn't the only company that was experimenting with cushioning in their sneakers, and in the 1980s, their eventual domination wasn't yet set in stone. The Reebok Pump showed that the recently acquired brand deserved its status as a proper OG. The The founder of Reebok, Joseph William Foster, designed some of the first running shoes that featured spikes for grip, so it makes sense that his brand would continue to innovate long after his passing. The formerly English brand had recently come under the control of Paul Fireman, an American businessman, and they were fighting Nike tooth and nail for market share. The Reebok Pump is a very nostalgic pair of sneakers thanks to its inflatable chamber. It ultimately ended up being a bit of a gimmick since the feature basically disappeared in subsequent years, but it showed just how many variables there are in the ever-changing sneaker landscape. Of course, if you want to talk about sneaker cushioning, it's hard to find a better example than the Nike Air Max. All of these shoes came out in the latter half of the 80s, and they all vied for a title of most innovative. The visible air bubble in the heel wasn't just a great way to add structural support for joints, it was also a bold fashion statement. Now, before we proceed to the new millennium, there's one final innovation that occurred during the 1980s sneaker revolution that many people forgot about. This was the decade when Adidas did the unthinkable by adding a computer component to its shoes. The Micro Pacer line, as it was called, came with a built-in step counter that logged your miles automatically. There were about 100 apps that can do this now, but having something like that literally incorporated into the shoe's design sounds like a novel concept even today. As we'll soon discuss, sneakers and technology were destined to become ever more integrated, and this wouldn't always involve apps and gadgets. Much of the technological process had to do with some good old-fashioned structural support. Today, we'd say that the Zoom Air technology Nike invented in the 90s is a prime example of that. Shoes like the Nike Air Marauder debuted in 1995, featuring this brand spanking new tech, which were compressible tensile fibers that added a literal spring into your step. Nowadays, this technology is pretty much everywhere, but it was still a pretty novel idea back when the 20th century was drawing to a close. In the 2000s, we saw Nike releasing the Shocks technology made to absorb impact from heel strike while running, but also add more power to a runner's stride. Many more technologies were tested, but nothing really made an impact. As usual, we sneakerheads tend to stick to the good old stuff that we're used to. The first next big thing happened in the early 2010s. In 2013, Adidas took things to a whole nother level with Boost cushioning technology. Working with the best chemist in Germany, the brand created a new type of foam that far surpassed anything that came before. Consisting of tiny little thermoplastic polyurethane particles, the foam in the soles also contained air gaps between each granule, which provided some extra spring in your step. The comfort was unparalleled. The durability was beyond question, and Adidas thoroughly proved that it was a force to be reckoned with. Nike's status as the undisputed king of sneakers was suddenly called into question, but the American juggernaut still had plenty of tricks up its sleeve. For example, flyknit technology created extremely lightweight shoes that could stand the test of time. The upper consists of several strands of durable yarn that combine to create a covering that's surprisingly robust and makes you feel like you're wearing nothing on your feet at all. The shoes were breathable as all get out and had enough flexibility to make each pair seem like a custom model. Sneakers have come a long way since their origins, and they're currently being improved in all sorts of ways. Over in Adidas's corner of the world, shoes are becoming more customized than ever thanks to 3D printing technology. The Adidas Futurecraft line is expressly designed to provide athletes shoes that will work for them, and it's not a stretch to imagine that this tech will find its way to consumers someday. Each pair is crafted to the contours of the wearer's feet, so you can see how high the demand would be if this becomes available to the regular folks someday. Not one to fall behind, Nike introduced self-lacing technology in 2019 with the Adapt BB. Now, you might be thinking that Nike Mag was the first shoe with self-lacing tech, but fewer than 1,600 pairs of those were made, and it was all just a gimmick that referenced Back to the Future 2. Besides, the resale market has pushed the price up to an insane $35,000 last we checked. The Apt BB is miles ahead of its predecessor and potentially opens the door for regular consumers for self-lacing shoes. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. These shoes contain a set of intricate mechanisms that react in real time, forming the perfect covering based on the type of activity they're being used for. The spatial reasoning alone is remarkable, so the future of sneakers seems to be totally limitless. We'll just have to wait and see where things go. So there you have it, folks. Which of these sneaker innovations intrigue you the most? Let us know in the comments below. That's all for now. See ya!